Good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of Institution of Engineering and Technology, I'm very happy to share with you that we have an expert panel today to share their thoughts about software-defined smart cities, towns, and villages. In specific, we as a panel going to spend some time on how these new age technologies like mobile, social, analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, mixed reality, blockchain, and other different technologies are going to change the landscape of the cities, towns, and villages. So we are here to share how the cities, towns, and villages can be shaped up in the era of fourth industrial revolution and digital era. Just to give you a brief about IET, it is 150 years age, probably young group, has been advocating pretty strong on engineering and technology, how these two can help in solving the various problems in the society. So with that note, without wasting much of the time, I would like to invite our esteemed panel to start with. I would like to invite Amruta Chowdhury. Amruta Chowdhury is the director of Gaia, an urban tech firm providing insights as a service for smart sites and smart cities, and she is based in Mumbai. She's a business strategist, engineer, innovator. She has 22 years of experience in innovation, strategy consulting, board advisory, and heading growth stage businesses across USA, Australia, and India. And very important information about her is she holds 7 US patents for semiconductor manufacturing. I think congratulations, Amruta. She is an independent director on the board and audit committee of Mahindra Life Spaces Developers, Nesco, and Simmons Marshall. She is on the board of Drishyant, a tech startup for social sector. She holds degree in BTech from IIT Kanpur, MS from UC Berkeley, and MBA from Carnegie Mellon Tepper Business School. Thanks, Amruta, for joining today's panel.
Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Our next panel member is well known in the smart and safe cities and construction space, JVS Ramakrishna. He has around 25 years of experience in technology, strategy, business development, global delivery, and building high performance cross domain teams. He has also worked in different countries like UK, South Africa, US, Japan, India. And currently, he is the business leader for safe and smart cities in L&T Smart World. Earlier to this role, L&T Smart World, he was the chief IT officer at Hyderabad Metro to provide tech leadership to Greenfield Metro Rail from strategy to different solutions. And his last role was country head and area vice president in South Africa. Thanks, Ramakrishna, for joining this session. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Right. Next, Sunil David. He's also my colleague in IET and very passionate leader. And he has 26 years of experience in the IT and telecom industry. And is currently the regional director, Internet of Things for AT&T India, and is based in Chennai. He is responsible for building the IoT strategy for the India and ASEAN regions and working with various internal stakeholders to ensure successful execution. Working on building a robust partner ecosystem for AT&T in the entire IoT value chain. That means the devices, the platforms, and applications. So I invite Sunil David to join this panel. Okay, thank you, Sunil, and thank you, everyone. Before we getting into the discussion, probably let me set the tone and context. Let us make this a bit of informal discussion, rather very formal panel. All right, we're talking about 3 important areas. So healthcare, education, and environment. All these 3 are very, very important, right? There are so many opportunities and challenges. So if you look at in the healthcare in India, I think 60% of the deaths are happening because of the non-communicable diseases like heart attack, diabetics, and so on and so forth. Surprisingly, in India, 60% of the money is spent from our pocket, unlike in other countries. In other countries, for the healthcare, they spend probably 13% around in USA type of a country. Most of the money is spent by governments. That's another important aspect we need to consider. And from the GDP, India spends just 4.7% for the healthcare. It is, I think, 125 times lesser than USA, probably 5.5 times lesser than China. I think there are so many opportunities exist how these digital technologies which we have been talked about can really take us to the next leap is very important. So we will discuss on that. And second important area is the education. I think education is very, very important. But I'm more concerned, I'm talking about this. When we're talking about the robots, the humanoids are going to take over. I think Sunil is probably passionately driving that with his IoT ideas. What happens to our workers, or white collar or blue collar? And most importantly, the students coming out of the academic institutions, are they ready for this game? So, unfortunately, in the Indian education system, most of the education happens with just reading and understanding, not analysis, application of the knowledge, and creativity. Unless we teach the students on those three, tomorrow reading and understanding type of skills will become redundant because the humanoids, the chatbots, and virtual assistants can do those recurring jobs efficiently than human beings. So, how education can really go to the next heights? I think that's very important. Second, important, because of these technologies, can we take this education to the doorsteps of the students in the rural India? I think that's very, very important. Today, thanks to technology, we can take it. A qualified and competent teacher from a metro city can teach, which can be probably taken by the rural students, right? That's one. And coming to, I think, the environment, and I also include there the biodiversity, very alarming statistics. The carbon emissions, if you look at, I think every year, 33.2 gigatons of carbon dioxide getting emitted. And 2.2 billion around people are drinking contaminated water, right? That is a serious alarming thing. And 18 million trees are cut just to get the paper. 40% of the forest is removed, I think, in the last 1 century by all of us as human beings, right? 7 billion animals getting killed for the human food every year. 7 billion people are dying just because of the pollution. Very, very alarming statistics. We are here to discuss now how the digital technologies, if not all the problems, but at least few of the problems we can solve effectively and efficiently, and we can also create new opportunities. To begin with, I request Amruta to share her thoughts on the healthcare in India or globally, what's happening, how these new technologies can help us to build a robust and sustainable healthcare system. Thank you, Amruta.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for inviting me for this panel. So you very effectively set up the challenge in India that we have, that healthcare spending is very low. So, if I were to just spend a minute on challenges before talking about, the opportunities. So challenges come from, a few different buckets. First of all, our infrastructure in terms of the availability of doctors is one of the lowest per capita population in the world. Availability of nurses is one of the lowest per capita in the world. Beds and other equipment capacity again is extremely low compared to our size of population, right? So that's a reality that we face with. Combined with that, there is budgets, there is affordability. So there are many things that are influencing how our population accesses both public health as well as the healthcare requirements for the more complex and the non-communicable diseases that you spoke about, right? Combined with that, one of the other challenges that we have is that from a human perspective is the whole idea of the the oath that the doctors take, and the Hippocratic oath, and how deeply do they follow it from a customer service delivery and a patient-centric approach, right? So that needs to be questioned actually at this point of time, and there is things that the Medical Council of India is doing. So what they did, one of the things that they did last year, in the last, which is going to be applicable from this current batch, is that medical ethics is something that has been introduced for the first time in our curriculum, right? And this is fairly important. And also, like, technology as a course curriculum has also been introduced, because today medicine and the delivery of medicine requires a lot of proficiency with tech of different kinds. Right? So again, like, that's something that is being introduced, but again, its effects will obviously, like, take time. So coming to the opportunity space, like, I would like to actually break it into two parts. One quick part about the current crisis, the corona crisis, which is obviously first and foremost, like, it is a health crisis. And then secondly, like, the longer term, like solutions that we have in place. So in the current crisis, like, what we've seen is that, the smart city infrastructure that had been put in some of the smart cities and implemented. So of the 100, about, like, 30 to 35 cities have actually implemented multiple solutions which are off the ground and running. And in those cities, they've been very actively able to use the deployed infrastructure to support the fight in the corona pandemic, right? So to just give you some examples, first of all, like, the integrated command and control center in smart cities was converted in several cities as a war room, and the cross-functional teams of both the, like, the health teams, the public health teams, the smart city teams, and the other, like, like health and sanitation, police, all of them, like, congregated there. It became the place from where all actions and initiatives were taken. As a company, we work very closely with Agra, and again, Agra has been at the forefront of this. So some of the public health related initiatives that were launched and used was like, a use of telemedicine, and like, looking at the command and control room center itself as a platform with the infrastructure that was already in place to enable the local doctors to quickly set up, like, like a telemedicine practice for general
if
health.
I interrupt here, you talk about telemedicine, and I read one of the articles where government doctors, I think for every 10,000 plus people, only one government doctor is today in India. Of course, the private hospitals are there and all, but poor people probably may not go. Today, somebody is saying if you go, if there is a corona and affected and you go there 1 lakh per day, nobody can afford that, right? So, do you think this telemedicine and maybe the robo doctors, where the doctors are number is low, and the preliminary things like non-mission critical type of diseases, where the IoT devices and robo doctors and all these things, do you think will help us to compensate that gap of not having as many doctors as possible?
Absolutely. Like, so like, the entire telemedicine has been happening for, like, the last decade. We've been hearing about it, but I think this crisis will actually give it a lot more impetus. And where, like, it is helping now is that there are kits that are being created for, like, let's say, like, not in the current scenario, not in the corona scenario, but in the normal scenario, like, a public health center, like, will be given a certain kinds of kits, which, like, then enable, like, a nurse practitioner over there to work with a doctor in the city, and then, like, like the diagnosis to happen that way, where certain kinds of tests, basic tests, like, like basic blood tests and so on, can be done by the nurse, and then the doctor and or the specialist can be on call. So clearly, like, that is a way to bridge both distance and, like, the resource constraint that we have in the country.
Can we see a doctor in the next 10 years, do you think? A doctor where come on to my screen and I just, all the details are sent, then it will say use this. And of course, the lot of regulatory and different standards to be there, but non-critical and no dangerous medicine specific to a doctor.
That I think is a far cry. I know. I mean, like, IBM Watson around the world, like, have been trying to see if it could bring in a lot of complex, like, like AI algorithms to do a lot of predictive analysis of, like, like trying to understand from symptoms, like, how to predict what the, like, patient's condition is, and from there, like, move on to the next steps of from diagnosis to the next step of action. and
Okay.
it's just very, very challenging, right? So to see a robo doctor or sort of like a chat robo doctor chatbot to do the full circle from speaking to the patient, diagnosis, and prescribing things, it's a far cry right now. It will be human aided, and that is the correct way to go for the next decade for sure.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
But
Please.
going back to the current corona crisis, some of the other public health related things have been so there have been a lot of apps and IoT wearables which have been used for tracking and quarantine monitoring. There are testing kiosks been made. There are a lot of app-based solutions, including some that Gaia has launched for COVID-19, which look at citizen health risk assessment. We've created platforms for hyperlocal delivery of essentials from the city to the poor, of to the general public, to bring in multiple providers and the city and the citizens onto a common platform, as well as different kinds of apps where citizens can raise emergency requests, and then somebody from the administration then follows up, right? So it's and on in using smart city tools, AI based analytics on the existing surveillance systems that had been created in cities have been used to look at containment, clustering, and so on, right? So smart cities in that sense have uh, contributed to this fight. But if we look at the longer term, right, some of the things that you talked about, can we use screening, can we use pattern recognition and so on. So there's a large number of startups which are already beginning to make their mark, right? So, for example, if you look at PAT lab testing, your basic blood report. So, there's a statistic which says that an MD student during their entire 4 years of MBBS would probably look through 30 to 40 blood plates samples, right, during studying. And while they have done their MD, they would have looked at another 60, 70. So in all, they would have looked at throughout their training, 100, 120 plates at the moment, right? That's their mental, neural network of patterns that they have. But there are tools available now which are trained on, let's say, 20,000 samples, right?
Oh.
So in routine things like this, where it is about pattern recognition. Similarly, there are lower cost, AI based solutions now for looking at the early detection of breast cancer screening and so on, right? So these are solutions which are based on pattern recognition, where again an AI aided solution can help a doctor increase and improve the efficacy of their diagnosis and early detection and prevention and so on, right? So there is a lot of things where such things are happening. Then this whole idea of blockchain for medical health record system, I think we need to see where we are in India, right? So in India, the first thing will be you just need the systems in place for creating the basic health records, right? So that is just the basic software SaaS platforms, IT enabled, just to capture the data digitally. That's the first step. The next step will then come the interoperability of data when you move from one doctor or one hospital chain to the other chain. How do you take it? How do you ensure data privacy?
But, sorry to interrupt.
That's the next stage.
Can I interrupt here?
Absolutely.
Just when you said this health records and all, who will maintain that hub? Because that is very. So there will be millions of hospitals will be there, millions of patients will be there, but somebody who is trusted. Of course, blockchain might help to some extent, but somebody should own that platform and make sure the access controls and everything to be done. Is it a government can do, or other organizations have to do that? This, as you said, interoperability, exchanging the information.
Yeah. See, I think the largest concern over here would be, especially in medical health records, will be privacy, right? Around the world, patient privacy is very important. So the government really does not get into maintaining health records of citizens in most countries, right? So that possibly is not the right way to start or the right point to start. And it is a challenge which even other countries which are on a slightly higher curve than us in adoption of medical record systems are still facing, because in global markets they tend to have large hospital chains or large insurance insurance services, which then connect with certain chains. So the point of entry is either through a large hospital chain having its system, which is then shared across its network of hospitals, or by an insurance company having a system which is then shared by all the hospitals in that network, right? But the minute you
So do
move
you
from
think we
that,
have, suppose if I am owning a hospital,
yeah,
every day 5,000, like XYZ type of hospital.
yeah,
So sharing information always, I'm worried. I mean, I have to share now. Today I went to one doctor in one big chain hospital, but tomorrow probably I went to another city where some other hospital I went there, the doctor has to access my electronic medical record.
yeah,
Right? That's the core crux of having these technologies, right? So I don't need to carry my record, and anywhere in the world I can access that. The doctor can see it. So, what is the timeline you think in India we reach that state?
globally we have not reached that stage, first
Okay.
of all. So it is utopia globally, right?
Okay.
Secondly, I think from a in a design thinking framework, there was a project that I was doing as part of one of there was an MIT led working session that we were a part of, and we were trying to see, can we use design thinking principles to rethink how would people get together, and how would so actually the questions governing this are not technology, but the questions governing this are: who owns the data? What is
Right.
the ethics of data sharing? What
Right.
are the rules and boundaries that govern data access and data sharing?
Okay.
Does the patient have access to all of his information? Right? Because as a patient, the hospital has certain things in their records. Do I have access to download 100% of that? And then when I move providers, can I take some of this along? So
Okay.
there is a larger question over here which nobody has solved.
So probably I think we will pause here, and we'll move to Ramakrishna and Sunil also to share probably very briefly. Sunil, in our view, how IoT devices will change the healthcare in the cities, villages, or towns? If you could share very briefly, that will be maybe Sunil, and after that, Ramakrishna can share. Ramakrishna, I have another question for you, as you come from a different segment. So, okay, Sunil, just
Right.
probably within 30 seconds, if it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely, VSR. So I think from an IoT standpoint, what I really noticed over the last 3 months is how quickly there were startups who came up with very innovative solutions. There's a startup called Nextbyte who came up with a low-cost ventilator. Today, a ventilator costs about 60 to 70,000 bucks. They came up with a ventilator for 6 to 7,000 rupees. There's another company called Avatar Tech Private Limited, which actually 3D printed a ventilator, low cost, right? So, the innovation that came through in the last 3 months, where you could actually build a device in short period of time at a very low cost. And now the next step is obviously to ensure that these are IoT enabled, so that you are able to get data in terms of how the ventilator is being used, performance and all. And the fact that the sensor cost has gone down, that is going to make it even more affordable going forward. So from an IoT standpoint, I think we're going to see a lot more such use cases. Ventilators, which should be IoT enabled. We already have robots. In fact, there's a robo in Kerala, which is called Karmi, which is there in hospitals, which is actually serving patients food. It's got a video display where the patients can actually interact with the doctor. So that's again an IoT-enabled robot. So I think IoT definitely does make a huge difference in terms of how do you monitor all these parts remotely, and also how to maintain that. Thank you.
Good. I think we are going to see probably 3D printed organs and the virtual models where these. I think because of whatever we call the technology, biodiversity, nobody wants to experiment on animals and other species. They want to have the virtual testing, simulating all those mouse and other things. Okay. All right. Ramakrishna, you have been, I think, in the industry where building the sort of mansions, and I'm sure you might have seen. What do you think, very briefly, how the hospitals, they change the configuration going forward in the cities or villages or the towns in terms of, because there is a lot of technologies are coming. Do you foresee the architectural perspective, construction perspective, the technology will change that? If I want to construct a new hospital, yes, you may suggest me, hey, sir, don't go with the old and outdated traditional practices. There is a new way to construct the hospitals for the benefit of the patients and to reduce the cost of maintenance, etc.
Yeah, yes, sir. First of all, thank you. Though I'm not a construction expert, but I can talk about what's happening in the industry. Uh, the L&T is more synonymous to construction, but we do 60 different businesses, right from missiles to many things, right? I mean, the
Right.
business I represent the smart world, which deals with smart cities, safe cities, and predominantly AI, IoT type of technology. But let me answer your question. The way L&T has changed itself, even on the construction side, is not about building a hospital. It's not about building a building. The design thinking has been applied right from day one, even in the construction. Where should be a bed should be? Where should be how should the bed configuration should be? Where should be an emergency landing will be? Will helicopter land the top? Then should have staircase? Should have some ramp? Or how you evacuate quickly? So the whole, if I can tell you that it's not about construction technology. There are a number of technologies of precasting, reconfiguration, so on, so how fast we can do. But the most important thing is, what does a doctor think about when he's actually entering? What does a nurse think about? So we actually have hired a lot of domain experts who can actually help in architecting the hospital in terms of the utility and user design thinking sort of thing, right? So that is the first thing, number one. Number two, while we are doing, we just don't build a building, right? I mean, there are a lot of systems that go along with it. Some of the systems will involve in terms of your imaging and some diagnosis stuff and all those things, in terms of putting in as a readily occupiable hospital sort of thing. There, what of late we have been talking about is using some of the technologies like IoTs and AIs. Predominantly, one thing which we have been seeing is people, especially when you go more and more into remote locations, the access to health in the remote locations is very, very limited to the only primary health centers, which have got 2 or 3 beds, which are remotely connected. There will be a nurse, and they are not actually connected to the mainstream doctor and diagnosis. So that is where actually what we are trying to help the governments is to put in a connectivity to connect the gram panchayats, number one, connectivity of 10 gig, 100 gig sort of thing, which will actually allow them to connect themselves to the nearest hospitals, number one, which is like Prime Minister of India, Honorable Prime Minister said that while connecting roads to rural areas has improved the rural economy, connecting them through broadband actually improves the digital economy. So health is considered to be one of the most important, impactful service that will come on. Number one. Number two, while like you are mentioning and Amrita was also talking about, there will be a lot of non-intervention diagnosis which could be done once you have a connectivity in terms of using artificial intelligence or machine learning, in terms of X-rays, in terms of some of these, radio, reports and all those things. Okay, even if you see typical radio imaging, report for any cancer type of therapy, what do they write? They actually do not actually give you a very precise diagnosis. They say no evidence of disease. They don't say no. They don't say there is no disease.
Not there, right? They say
so what actually it means. What actually it means is they actually see the report and they try to find out and give the best probable thing that can happen in that. So
sure.
I think that from the infrastructure point of view, it is not the physical infrastructure. It is a digital connected. All three together actually is going to impact the health sector.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Ramshna. Maybe I'll slightly change because you already spoke. Yeah, Sunil?
Just one point I want to make here, and that is to do with the digital adoption within hospitals. I was the other day hearing an interview with Sangeeta Reddy, the joint managing director of Apollo.
Yeah.
Apollo is very, very advanced in terms of using digital, right? So they have AI-based risk scoring. They have great platforms where they can train their doctors, simulators, and all that stuff. They came up with a red book which has all COVID-related information. So I think it's time for other hospitals also to start their journey. Many of them are very, very early in their adoption. And I think if other hospitals, and technology has become affordable now, if other hospitals also take a cue with Apollo has already led the way, then I think it will go a long way in terms of, from a healthcare perspective. Because today it's all post-care. I think that we need to move to condition management. We want to make sure that we prevent rather than end up having to get admitted and then spend more time on the post-care part.
Just very quickly to build up on that, if I could.
Yeah.
This whole idea of digital patient experience management is sort of coming in highly around the world and also in India. And if you think about it, I mean, a large part of the patient's experience relates to not just the medical intervention, but the pre and the post management of it, right? Like,
That's
this
very
is where
important.
digital technology really helps.
It's like a
And
journey.
also,
Yeah.
like, like the entire the continuum of care, as they say. And then the other thing is that, from a cost perspective, about 15 to 18% of any hospital's costs come from the non-medical processes, people, equipment. So just your general, your things like, your HVAC, the blood bank operation, the canteen operation, the staff, the ward boys, and so there's a lot of talk about efficiency and optimization over there, because right now we are seeing that skilled labor is there's a shortage of skilled labor, and there's a lot of time sometimes that gets wasted in terms of critical care not being given because of these kinds of time lags. So again, low cost technologies can help there.
Okay, thank you. Ramkrishna, you want to say very quickly so we can
One
move to
last
other
point. One last point. You were
Yeah.
talking about the hub of medical records. Recently, Niti Aayog has already announced, after they announced this Ayushman Bharat, they're actually working on something called National Health Stack, which exactly talks about the hub, what you're talking about in terms of EMRs, wherein the patients as well as the insurance providers can have an exchange the records and then the claims and all those things.
Excellent.
I think it's expected to be done in 2022.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to see how it progresses.
Now the doctors in millions of hospitals also need to get the access without compromising the privacy. The patient has to get access and all. I think that hub is very critical. For that, probably blockchain play a very vital role. Yeah. So maybe I will change the order. So maybe I'll ask now Sunil. Already I think Ramkrishna spoke now. So let us get into Sunil. I want to ask you a question. So do you think we all will survive for a long time in the current environment and the imbalance what we have been creating? What do you think? And are we going to give a better future for the next generation?
I'm always an optimist, VSR. So I'm pretty sure that maybe future generations will probably have a better environment and better, cleaner air to breathe in. But coming to this whole topic of environment, VSR, I was reading a Stanford study. As per a Stanford research, it showed that the forest loss has led to the spread of pandemic diseases. They came up with a study in April 8, 2020. And if you just look at COVID, if you just look at the origination of this whole thing, it happened in Wuhan in China in a seafood market, right? And apparently, at least at the initial studies, say that it got transferred from a bat, right? That is what the initial study says. And so what has happened is massive deforestation has happened. And what happened is that because of that, you find animal habitats getting destroyed, and the animals have come closer to where human habitats have lived. And that is the root cause, So a lot of the previous pandemics also have to do with the same aspect of massive deforestation, and we completely change the animal biodiversity, so to speak, right? So I think and technology can perhaps play a big role there, right? For example, you could have drones that can do tree count in forests. You could have sensors attached so that you can make sure that people don't intrude to areas which you're not supposed to. So technology can definitely play a big part there. Now, coming to the environment part, I just wanted to divide this into three parts. One is waste, and the second is water. Two parts actually. And the 5th of January was the World Environment Day, right? I think we celebrated this about 10 days back, World Environment Day. And I just wanted to share some statistics. Last week when we had the call, you suggested that we share some statistics. So I'm just going to reel out a few of them. So as per some studies that were done by World Economic Forum, World Bank, World Wildlife Fund, and UN, I'm just sharing some of them. So it says that 30% of edible food produced per annum is wasted. Food wastage causes 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. 3 kgs of wasted food produces 23 kgs of CO2 that is emitted in the atmosphere. 85% of all textiles are thrown away each year. 35% of microplastics which never degrade are found in the Earth's oceans come from textiles like polyester. And microplastics causes 31% of plastic pollution in the oceans. So can you imagine, the kind of situation that you're dealing with, right? Another study, this is done by a company called Xylam. It says that in India, 62,000 million liters of water is generated, wastewater sewage is generated in urban areas. 62 million liters of per day of wastewater sewage is generated in urban areas, and only 37% of sewage generated is treated. Right.
Mm.
So
hats up to you, and still you are very optimistic. I'm very, I think you are pretty confident. So
No,
how the next 20 years will change, we have to see now.
no, we
At
have
least our generation needs to get benefits with technology.
So the VSR, I think we made the right start, right? So, for example, some of the smart city initiatives, obviously, they need to be accelerated in terms of using of technology. And waste, we're talking about waste management. Of course, technology will play a big part there. And we're talking about waste management, smart waste management. And I want to, expand on what smart means when you talk about waste management, because that obviously is impacting in the environment in a big way. More waste gets generated, more of methane gets generated, and obviously has an impact on the environment. Smart, I'm just expanding on smart. One is you segregate waste, then you modularize waste, so you have them in separate modules. You assess, you recycle and trace. Now, in all these areas, you could definitely use technology, right? For example, simple use case VSR, waste bins, which are, today you have technology, we can have sensors attached to waste bins. The moment the fill levels go up to a certain percentage, 80%, 90%, alerts can get generated, and the municipal guy can send the pickup guy to come and lift it up and take it to and get it disposed. Right? That is a simple use case. Certain cities are doing it. Perhaps this has to get all more pervasive in India.
I think they are becoming some revenue generating entities also. They are putting some electronic screen on that, the waste bin, and playing some ads in some of the countries. So that could be a revenue generation for municipalities. Yeah,
absolutely. And yes, sir, one more use case I want to give you. Again, IoT enabled. We work with a company called Emerson, and a lot of food waste. When you generate a lot of food waste in restaurants, malls. So what they have done is, we work with Emerson, where the food waste is they use machines to convert that food waste into biofuel, and those. Yeah, so you can actually convert it into biofuel, and those are IoT enabled. So when the waste gets up to a particular level, alerts get generated, and it creates what is called the liquid slurry, and that liquid slurry is then taken, and they use another process to convert it into biofuel. Right. So that's another use case. Now the next point which I wanted to make very quickly on water. Again, as I mentioned, so much of water getting wasted. Apparently, to 7,500 liters of water is used to make one pair of jeans. 7,500 liters of water used to make one pair of jeans. So I think the need is to optimize water usage. Agriculture, as a country, we are so dependent on paddy. There's so much of water which is used for paddy cultivation, and a lot of that water gets wasted. And I just wanted to highlight one use case here: how you can optimize water usage using technology. And this solution, actually, we've not done it in India, but can definitely be replicated in India. And the technique is called alternate wetting and drying, because in paddy cultivation, you got to maintain 4 inches of water. Okay, you always have to mention that flood of 4 inches of water. Now, what we've done is we worked with one company called Precision King, where we attach sensors to the fields and measure how much of water is there. Okay, so what happens is that you measure constantly the level of water on a field, and there's always this process of alternate wetting and drying. So there are periods when there is dry land, and when it comes to a stage where it is dry, you send a signal to the pump to pump water, and then water gets
automatically.
Yeah. So, and then you fill up that you fill up the field with that 4 inches of water. So you alternately wet and dry at the same time, and then see the impact. See when you less usage of pump, because if you are using less water, your pump usage is less. When you're using less pump, obviously less of electricity generated, less electricity is used, and that has an impact on environment also, because the more of the pump that you're using, you're generating also a lot of CO2 emissions. And even in fields, when you're having a lot of water, it creates what is called as an anaerobic condition, where it generates a lot of methane, right? So in one solution, you can actually address 3 things. So one is you optimize water usage. Secondly, you reduce pump usage so that you don't, you save on electricity. And third is you also have an impact on environment where you're not actually generating too much of methane, right? So the question is, how do you build a solution that is affordable for farmers in India? And there again, innovation would obviously be a big part of it. Need to work with startups to do that. And last point which I want to make is in terms of within buildings, within residences, how people like you and me can play a part. Like, in terms of how do we optimize water usage. And we have startups who actually have very good solutions. I know of a startup in Chennai. It's called VGOT. So they have solution where you can attach sensors to the pipes. So the moment there's a leak, you get an alert. And then they have these smart meters. And this is not a new thing, right? So smart meters, smart water meters, right? So I think if every apartment, every building has smart water meters where each of us pay based on actual water that we consume, then I think that will be a great start, PSR. So that's why I'm very optimistic that we have technology today. And if we're able to leverage that to the best, then I'm sure things would only get better in the future.
I think I'm sure, Sunil, in the interest of the time, probably to, I think, stop here. But you are very optimistic, and I think I'm also getting confidence that some of the technologies and the solutions what you shared, certainly we can do something great in the coming years. End of the day, I think the Panchabhutas, whatever we call air, water, land, and two more are there, fire and sky, but three already got polluted daily: air, water, and land. Land is also got polluted with these fertilizers and whatever we have been using. So, how the technologies can probably predict the negative impact of all the things what we are doing and alert, warn us, and probably put us in the right direction. I think that probably we can expect in the coming years. Thank you so much, Sunil. So let us move to the education now. I think I start with Ramakrishna. So I think we have great history, Ramakrishna, right? And we always climb. India was great. I always say that we have to go back to the future. So where we invented zero, we invented chess, we did the first surgery, we had some 33%, I think, the GDP share in the world in the past. So today, I met one of the, I think, Ramujinagar, we met once, long back. He was telling why we are not able to produce the Nobel laureates from India. It happened long back. And whoever basically climbed greatly, the guys are settled there maybe 25 years, 30 years back. They become grandfathers of that country, not our citizens, right? They're born in India, but it doesn't mean that they are something, the Nobel laureates from India. So there's a lot of scope for improvement for India to come back to I think, the past glory. So what do you think, how technologies will help to change the education system from rural India to the urban India?
Yeah, so yes, sir. First of all, education has been our backbone, and given the population, the demographics of our population, I think close to around 10 million people go to schools at various levels in terms of primary education or higher education. One of the biggest thing, if you see, our biggest problem has been again access to the education and affordability are the primary challenges. Now, the affordability, I think, of late since last 5 years, many state governments are coming with new schemes in terms of making it cheaper. Somebody says we should go for English medium. Somebody says we should teach mother tongue, and so on and so forth. There is some focus coming in. Surprisingly, I should tell you, from 13-14 to 17-18, the higher education, the students' intake has actually increased from 32 million to 36 million. 36 lakhs, 32 lakhs to 36 lakhs, which means that students are now, good news is that they are coming to the schools. But the bad news is the teachers actually have started coming down from 13 lakhs to 12 lakhs. Okay. And good quality teachers are also, availability is becoming less and less because people pursue the professional courses either to go to the urban areas or to, which is more promising, commercially and all. There are people who really want to passion. They are actually settling down into the teaching profession. Also, if you see, but if you benchmark this whole thing, India with globally, what you are actually talking about in the other countries, we have a student-teacher ratio of 24:1. Whereas one of the best is Canada, I think it is around 9:1. So we have a long way to go on that. So one of the key thing I think we need to do more and more is give right to education is a one good policy that has come into play for, where people have right to for education, first of all, which means that people can go to the schools. There are many central schemes which people are pushing in terms of making the education accessible to the rural areas. And of course, it's always available in urban, but in a different degrees of commercial impact. Some are expensive, some are not expensive. But the important thing is, I think government has also realized the role of technology in this, in improving the accessibility. Number one, what they are doing is, there is a scheme called Rashtriya Madhyanik Shiksha Abhiyan, which actually pushes ICT in schools. For example,
Okay.
60% of the schools of around 1,50,000 schools approximately are actually digitized. When I say digitized, there are some iPads, there are some projectors, so there is a last mile facility to do a digital content. Number one. Number two, like you have been talking about, saying that an urban teacher is available in the rural or a rural school get an access to a district headquarters. Because if you see some places there is shortage of science teachers, there is shortage of mathematics teachers. How do we bring cover that up? Their technology plays an important role if we are able to connect these schools using the broadband. So there are many programs which Government of India has started to connect some of the schools at the Gram Panchayat level, which is called a program called BharatNet. Actually, it connects
Right.
the Gram Panchayats. So which is very, very, very important thing. The moment that comes in, few schools will come onto the broadband or internet, actually, which can be connected. The third important thing is, uh, for us, when we are actually talking about most of these schools, the biggest problem, if you see the challenges here, it is not only teachers, it is not only affordability, it is not only connectivity. The other biggest part is the mode of education and the content, okay, which requires a huge, revamp in terms of how do we take the education. For example, you compare the Nobel laureates in US and here, the reason in the education system here is more of going through the textbooks and then come back. We don't
Right.
actually have this system of questioning and all. But again, technology intervention comes in a lot because in the last 1 month I've been seeing with my own kids. I think they get into a digital, classrooms. They keep talking about it. The people who are actually hesitant to talk and question earlier, on a digital one, they're able to talk because there is
Hmm.
facility for raising hand. They're able to ask some question.
But you are not nearer, so teacher don't beat you maybe.
Probably. But I think
Yeah.
technology, if we are having a studio and a software, which I think many states have started really looking at it, wherein there is recorded sessions, they can hear to the lessons not once, twice, thrice if they miss. Okay, so I think these are all interventions which are helping them to get attracted to the classrooms. Number one. Number two, connecting is providing the accessibility, thereby again affordability. I think all these things put in place, I think we have got a very bright future. Leveraging technology in the education system.
Right. So, what do you see in other countries and here, I spoke to Amrita about robot doctor, that might be a bit dangerous. It's playing with, I think, life. But here, I think playing with knowledge is also dangerous. They cannot give wrong knowledge. So, do you think robot teachers are in the offing in India in the next 5 years? Already something started, but a little bit more mature and how you think, because teachers availability itself is becoming a challenge. It will be a challenge in future also.
See, the biggest problem we have is, not about delivering the content. I mean, Robo can come and deliver whatever it is. I think in education system, I mean, especially in the primary school and higher school, I think this teacher to student connectivity is extremely important. We can actually plug in the availability of the teachers or content or accessibility here and there using technology. I don't think teachers can be replaced by robots ever. Actually, even there could be here and there people trying it out from the technology intervention point of view. But our education is not about subjects. It's about the holistic character, holistic personality, and all those things. I think that comes a lot from the teachers. And another disadvantage of this technology, especially during Corona time, is that now the students don't meet each other, so it's like all virtual. So they don't have this people to people connect, and then they're all focused only on what they're teaching. They focus or defocus, whatever it is. I think what is important is I don't see robots coming in, but what I see a lot of role in terms of artificial intelligence coming in terms of monitoring the students' behavior, who is lagging, who is not lagging, not just by marks, in terms of their behavior, their attention. How can we actually help to change the course content so that we can deliver better and better? Those things are already happening. We are already working on few projects, which will help the teachers on that.
Okay. So Amrita, in this line, probably I want to ask you a bit of a challenging question. If some of the countries they are operating their restaurants using robots, even at the reception they have the robots who invites us. The servicing is done by robots, and why not robots teach the students? If I have very less number of teachers, a robot teacher will be there. I will have a name, and she looks like any human being, a humanoid. I mean, what is the problem with that? What do you think?
So, can I split that into, if you think of virtual learning, right? Virtual learning has existed, right? And virtual learning consists of like a combination of recorded sessions. It consists of videos and PPTs, and there are at the very high end, if you look at a Harvard Management, or it's a fully virtual classroom where you know exactly at which minute, as a because it's meant for executive education, so you know exactly at which minute you pause, which answer did you not take, did you take 10 minutes, did you take 10 seconds longer to answer something, and so on. So they are not just building in information of capturing your uh, knowledge grasping of how you move from one module to the other module, but also in business there's a lot of questions around ethics. So if you pause, it's actually assessing your ethical framework as well, to say which questions you pause on and which questions that you don't pause on, right? So there's a lot of AI that is being built in it. Now, can that replace the last mile teacher in every scenario? I think yes and no. I'll give you a couple of examples of where things are happening, right? So at the grassroots level, this whole notion of teaching in vernacular is very important. So there's a startup, for example, which is looking at students. It's focused on students in Bihar, okay, and where you need to teach them not just in Hindi, but in the dialect and in the sort of tonality of Hindi that is important for that particular student, so that they can both understand the teacher and be able to feel comfortable with the way in which the content is being delivered, right? So there are people who are looking at that level. I have another friend who's he's a professor at IIT Delhi, and what he has created for all of the IITs nationally is this online lab, where a lot of resources of different laboratories in different IITs have been brought online, so that students can share resources. And I'm talking of lab, right? So there is a way in which they are being able to do this whole idea that Ramakrishna mentioned about learning by doing, which is very critical. And can you virtualize that learning by doing experience? And the IITs have started that experiment, and that's gone well for them. Again, at the grassroots level, there's a lab on a cycle, and the lab on the train, which has been going around. So how do you bring access to students at different levels? And that's the important thing. So it's not a full robot, but it is a robotic and AI and AR VR experience combined together with humans, which is then delivering the last mile experience that you need.
Yeah, maybe by 2040 around, we'll see completely robots driven schools. Probably we'll see that. All right.
And there was an initiative from the government that just got announced, so NCERT has joined with a few organizations, and a lot of the curriculum is going to be made digital. And this is really for the last mile. And as I talked to actually some of my household help, and I know that they are telling me that in their villages, children, because they have no other form of access, so the homework is being sent on WhatsApp, and the child is doing the homework, and then the mother or the father is taking a picture and sending the homework back by WhatsApp. So that's become a mode of communication.
Excellent. Good. So let us hope for the best. And Sunil, I have one more question. Probably we'll conclude then.
Yes, sir. Just on a very lighter note, when you can have a robo in a hospital, when you can have a robo in a restaurant serving food, why not a robo as a teacher?
No, I'm thinking robo as a teacher. For every 1 hour, it changes his color, hairstyle, and one robot teaches all subjects. When teaching a different subject, it changes his configuration. I will not get bored. Right? So that's where I need.
While we are talking about robot teachers, students are actually thinking about robot proxy students.
Oh.
That is dangerous. Sunil, very serious note is see, with all this connectivity, all the students are getting a lot of, I think, access to the knowledge. There is a decline on the respect towards the teachers, because sometimes the students are pretty good in terms of acquiring a knowledge, because they are seeing the videos, and so much of knowledge is available. Culturally, I think that's very challenging. Second is the crimes, what is happening today, also very alarming. A teenage guy is raping a girl. I mean, and even 8-year-old boy talking about something which not expected in our generations, right? So that means this, whatever great technologies giving a benefit, there is a negative side of that. What do you think we need to do as a government or citizens to control it? I think if you can share it in 30 to 40 seconds, we can conclude the session.
Yes, sir. It all boils to a mindset change. I think that children, they're when they are 3 to 4 years itself, the kind of character gets formed very early in their life. I think the onus is on the parents to make sure that they get them to inculcate the right set of values so that they know to respect women, and once they get to school, to respect teachers. So I think I'm not going to use technology here, but I think it's more on the parents' part to make sure that very early in life they get their students to, the kids to kind of inculcate the right set of values, right? But other thing is, yes, sir, I think even for the students, they should. There are a lot of these myths which are there. That the technology is only for the rich and the elite. Technology is only for the guys who are very tech savvy. I think those myths have to go. Or even online education. I think this whole blended learning, 70%. Right now it's about 100%. Everything is online, but I think the new normal will be like 70% online and 30% maybe face to face, maybe in the next 1 year or so, depending on how quickly we find a vaccine. But I think we got to remove all those myths, saying that online education is not really good, or the certificates and education, whatever certification that you do, courses that you do may not be very valid. All these myths have to go off at a very early stage, VSR. And I think that myth that tech will replace teacher, I think that has to be completely removed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is a wonderful discussion. Probably we planned for an hour. So what we are trying to say here is technology is going to improve, create new opportunities in the education, healthcare, or environment, but also it helps us to solve the current problems which are existing for a long time. It is there. So I think when I was talking to some of the forums, I'm saying the technologies are giving life to things today. It's not only human beings. Somebody asked, what is the population of India? It's not 130 crore, it is 200 crore, because we have so many, I think, non-living things got that IoT-enabled sensors, and they are able to predict, talk, and all, right? So there is a people to things, and things to things are getting communicated in real time. If that is the case, the cities, the towns, and villages will really get transformed. So we will have tomorrow maybe 250 crore population in India, like Saudi Arabia has given an identification number for Sophia, the robo. You will have for another 100 crore population in India, in cities, villages, and towns, some national ID. So you have to work with them. So I think that probably in the next 15, 20 years it may happen. But it may not happen, but it should start. That's where I said back to the future doesn't happen just, I think, with some slogans. If you start, it will come that change after 25, 30 years in any country. I think all these innovations should start in IITs, IIMs, and other institutions. People like us, I think, under IIT umbrella, the Institution of Engineering and Technology is for that, not only for today and also for tomorrow. A better today and better tomorrow. Thank you so much, Amrita, Ramakrishna, and Sunil joining for this session. I look forward to, I think, work with you to bring some change in the cities, towns, and villages powered by technology. Thanks, Sujani and Venkateshwari.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank
Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you.